What's up everybody, this is the Act Man here, and today I'm going to document most of the bugs and glitches of Warzone Firefight, and how some of these issues are amplified by the bad game design. Now the reason I'm making this video is because back when the beta came out, I had an absolute blast playing Warzone Firefight. I was incredibly hyped for it, and when Warzone Firefight came out, I quickly made a video talking about the DLC and how awesome it was. Little did I realize that the more games I played, the more I realized and noticed all of the glitches and problems. Since the game mode came out back in June, I have been recording and cataloging most of the glitches I've experienced. In addition, I've reached out to my subscribers and had tons of people emailing me and sending me footage of their glitches. I've been doing this because I think it is important for everyone, especially 343, to understand just how unprofessional, sloppy, and poorly programmed Warzone Firefight is. Now keep in mind that these are my opinions, and while I do believe the footage will speak for itself, at the very least I want everyone who watches this video to come to their own conclusions about things. And I want you to consider me as a game tester that compiled all this footage and evidence because I genuinely want these problems to be seen and fixed by 343 so that the Halo 5 experience is better for everyone, or at the very least have them understand just how broken the game mode is. The format of this video will be simple. I'll show all the glitches and footage I have in alphabetical order, I'll give my opinions about them, and put any important information in the bottom middle. If there is no name, then it's a clip that someone sent to me, without giving me their gamertag, or it's a clip of mine. The titles of the glitches and timestamps will be found in the description, so that it can be easier to navigate. And I want to give a big shout out to SPD Cadet and Yark47 for helping me type up the timestamps. Also, I want to clarify in this video I use the words bug and glitch interchangeably. Most of this footage will be exclusive to the Warzone Firefight game mode, though some of these do overlap into regular Warzone, Warzone Assault, or may just be problems with the overall game itself. Alrighty, so let's put on our game testing goggles and jump straight into this. So we're going to start things off by observing some of the glitches, exploits, and bugs with the artificial intelligence of the enemies. This clip features a boss that somehow got flipped out of his ghost. The only thing he appears to be programmed with doing are dodging and throwing plasma grenades. At the very end, he throws a plasma grenade at me, and you can clearly see there is no animation for this, giving me almost no time to react to it. Here is another example of how the AI ghost bosses react when they are no longer in their ghosts. This is a pretty common glitch. This happens when enemies, specifically elites, in Warzone Firefight hijack a vehicle, but apparently have no programmed actions to take when they're in the vehicle. This results in enemies hilariously standing like a confused pigeon, when they should be sitting, driving, or shooting. What makes this clip especially funny is that this is a boss elite, an enemy that is supposed to be hard to take down. Also, the ridiculous ragdoll effects that occur after he is killed. Now, I'm going to try and talk about this glitch without laughing my ass off. As you can see, an elite boards a Needler Warthog, and while the animation of the boarding is pretty bad, the funny part is how the elite reacts to being in the turret. I don't even need to say anything. Just look at this. Look at how confused he is. He has absolutely no idea what to do. He's twitching wildly and firing in random directions. And here's another example of an elite sitting in the passenger seat. Here is another example of an elite in a turret. These glitches with the elites hijacking Warthogs should have been easily found and fixed by 343. This is a bizarre glitch where an elite sticks himself with a plasma grenade. You can see here that when he throws it, it actually appears outside of where it is actually thrown from. In this clip, we see some of the problems with the AI. Namely, that if you stand in this particular spot and get their attention, you can exploit the poor AI behavior and fire on the hunters without having to worry about your own safety. While this clip is only 30 seconds long, the player was probably standing in the same spot for a bit longer than that. Another bizarre glitch where an enemy Phaeton twitches around as if it doesn't know what to do or who to attack. This clip highlights the weird behavior of enemies in vehicles. As you can see, a poor Banshee flies into the home base, but his poorly programmed AI isn't enough to get him to fly out of there, and he suffers an embarrassing death. In this clip, we can see the unpredictable behavior of the AI. Slowing down the footage, we see that this knight actually fires his incineration cannon in a direction where he and his gun are not pointing. This results in an unfair death of the player, as he probably didn't expect the knight to fire at him like this. This clip shows a series of glitches related to the Mantis boss on Darkstar. As you can see, the pilot is fed up with our shit and decides to get out. Now, a lot of glitches happen in a short amount of time. 1. The boss does an insta-kill Spartan charge without sprinting. 2. The Mantis boss is actually an invisible Spartan holding an AR. 3. When the player shoots at the invisible AR with a charged plasma pistol shot, the game thinks the boss is still in its vehicle and registers the shot as if it hit the Mantis. 4. The boss dies and the Mantis explodes. Both happen for no explainable reason. Here is another example. In this clip, the Mantis is getting EMP'd, and again, lots of glitches, short amount of time. 1. As the boss gets out of the vehicle, the Mantis continues to fire missiles. 2. The boss regains all health and shields. 3. The boss does the same insta-kill Spartan charge. Here is yet another example, and you can get a sense of just how frequently and game-breaking this bug is. Again, this is something that should have been seen and fixed by the developers. In this clip, we see the poorly programmed AI behavior shine once more, as the Promethean soldiers don't seem to recognize they are getting shot and simply sit there doing nothing until their eventual death. This clip shows the same problems as the Mantis boss. For whatever reason, the AI feels the need to get out of the vehicle they're in, resulting in a hilarious explosion and the death of his turret companion. I'm really not sure why this is such a recurring problem with the enemies in Warzone Firefight, but I think it's safe to say this game mode was not properly tested before it was released. Moving on, we see a player assassinating the Warden after firing some shots into him. What is odd is how the game does not give any credit towards the player doing the assassination. I think a simple fix that allowed anyone assassinating a boss to be given credit for the kill would fix this bug. This clip shows the brutally unfair difficulty of Warzone Firefight. As you can see, the player is killed very quickly, but what is interesting is that by slowing this down frame by frame, we find out that the exact time to kill between the first shot hitting the player and his death is 22 frames. Or 1/3 of a second. Yes, the Banshees in Warzone Firefight can kill you in 1/3 of a second. In this clip, we see a Banshee Raider boss getting stuck in midair. This either shows us the poor map design, the poor programming, or a combination of both. Now, this is a weird glitch showing all of the enemy Banshees stuttering in midair every few seconds, as well as being completely invulnerable to the player's Scorpion attacks. I classify this as a WTF glitch, a glitch that I can offer no explanation for. This is a very annoying game-breaking bug, where the bosses in Warzone Firefight can regenerate all of their health in less than 1 second. As you can see, the Warden's health is almost half empty, but as I'm running up to get close to him, the health bar has been completely restored. This glitch is especially annoying because it can happen to those glitched Mantis bosses on Darkstar when they're still in their vehicles. I get that watchers can heal the health of bosses, but that should be gradual, not instantaneous. In this clip, we see an elite. Now, the problem with this elite is he takes a total of 4 BR bursts and 12 melees to take down. I mean, even if he isn't a boss, shouldn't he have a health bar? That's a ridiculous amount of health to give a basic enemy. This is a recurring problem in other Warzone playlists, and extends to Firefight as well. Sometimes you try and redeem a Req, and it just doesn't work. Here's another example. This is a very common glitch that pretty much anybody can see. When you're way off in the distance and you're trying to look at moving enemies, they will pop in and out like crazy. Not to mention, parts of the map will do the same thing. There's really not much to say about this. Just look at the screen and look at everything that's disappearing and reappearing. Moving on, one of the biggest and most recurring problems with Firefight is just how glitchy and messed up the Phantoms and Dropships are. In this instance, we see 2 hunters that jump through the top of the Phantom instead of jumping out from the opening doors. They twitch around and then stand on top of the Phantom. Notice how the Dropship sinks through the ground completely due to the bizarre physics. Here is another instance of the Hunter Dropoff glitch. Notice this happens under the exact same circumstances. Final round on Sanctum. So this is not an isolated incident. This is something that once again should have been found and fixed before release. This clip shows the biggest problem with the Phantoms and Dropships. Namely, all the enemies in the Dropships are invincible until they exit it. This totally screwed with my head. Because since the original Halo, players have always been able to shoot out the enemies, destroy the turrets, destroy the plasma turrets, the gunners, and the ghosts and wraiths attached underneath. And even destroy the Phantom itself. So when I realized that all the enemies in the Phantoms were invincible, I had to start reprogramming my brain, retraining all the times I've encountered the dropships in past Halo games, erase all of that, and remind myself that anything touching a dropship is invincible until it no longer touches it. Bonus glitch! Notice this Jackal right here is sitting in the Phantom, but then exits the Phantom in the most hilarious way possible. Here is another example of the weird way the enemies leave the dropship. Notice how this is the exact same scenario as the previous clip. This is a clip showing how the vehicles being transported by the dropships are invincible. The big problem with these invincible enemies is that the previous Halos used to reward you for proactive behavior. If you were able to shoot down a couple enemies or vehicles that were being transported, you could make your life a little bit easier in the long run. Here I thought I would get a nice double kill with the last shot in my ad Victorium. I was wrong. Again, we can see the obvious problems of the invincible turrets. In this case, the player brings in a fresh Scorpion. He's driving around and a Phantom drops down very quickly. He pointlessly tries to kill the turret and the enemies in the Phantom, but realizing they are invincible, his only choice is to run away. But the Phantom turrets don't let that happen, and he gets pummeled by two different turrets. There is no way to play around a permanently invincible enemy. Here is another example of a player that naturally thinks he can kill the plasma turrets. This time he's in a Wraith. Again, the same situation. Of course, he can't play around the invincible enemies and dies an unfair death. This is a clip from the beta. Notice how two Jackals float with the Spirit in midair and are not holding weapons. Then notice the very jittery animations when the enemies actually do jump out. One of the other main issues with the dropships is just how carelessly the developers were in having them spawn in and out of the game. I don't think players should be able to see these things because for me it breaks the immersion, and instead of fighting the enemies and playing the game, I'm focusing on how poorly the game mode is designed. As a developer, it is your job to hide these things from the players. In this clip, we see a Phantom that disappears out of thin air. Notice that it doesn't disappear because of some despawn mechanic at the end of each round, but perhaps it was just destroyed and didn't have any sort of animation for it. This is a clip from the beta, which again shows the invincible enemies in the Phantoms, specifically the elites in the plasma turrets. Now, despite this being an obvious problem and something I brought up in my How to Make Warzone Firefight Awesome video, this was never fixed, and is still a glitch in the Warzone Firefight mode today. Similar to the Knight that wasn't looking where it was shooting, the same thing can happen with the Phantom turrets. Notice how the gun is obviously facing in the opposite direction of where the projectiles are actually being fired towards. The problem with these types of bugs is that the player is supposed to be able to see and trust the actions of the enemies so that they can properly react to them. But when an enemy is shooting at you and they aren't looking at you, or they throw a grenade without an animation, it just makes Warzone Firefight feel very unfair and unpolished. As if being invincible wasn't game-breaking enough, the plasma turrets on the Phantoms have an insanely quick time to kill. In this instance, the time between the first shot hitting me and my death is 15 frames, or half a second. So if you see a Phantom, your best strategy is to hide. Now this clip shows the absurdly unfair difficulty of Firefight. So now that we know the turrets on the dropships are invincible, the best strategy is to hide, right? Well, except in this round. Because I have to defend the cores, so I make the decision to go in anyway, only to get killed by the extremely powerful and accurate plasma turrets. The problem is that I was killed by an enemy I cannot fight. My options in this scenario are hide, wait for the enemies to damage the core, leave my teammates to fight without me, or risk my life and hope that I don't get gunned down. And I think this really highlights the poor design of Warzone Firefight, because those turrets will fire at the cores, meaning you are supposed to defend a core from an invincible enemy. Truly game-breaking. This clip shows the weird physics of the Phantoms. I'm not sure why the Phantom reacts to the Phaeton like this. Here is an example of the weird physics and poor AI programming of the dropships. Notice how the Spirit is sick of the Phantom's shit and rams into it. Here is another instance of the Phantoms materializing in a very obvious way. Once again, the developers need to hide these things because it breaks the immersion and is distracting. A weird clip showing a couple Phantoms floating in midair doing nothing. When I approach them, the opening door sound effect plays. But no enemies or ghosts are dropped off. This is confusing to the player because they probably expected there to be enemies in the vicinity, but no, it's just a glitch. The poor behavior of the dropships does not encompass just the Phantoms, but also the spirits. As you can see, this spirit can't seem to figure out where to go and appears to be stuck in the ground. I don't think this is supposed to happen. Moving on, here we see a hilarious glitch of an elite that appears to be frozen in time. He seems to be dead, but his body stands there like a brick. I have no idea what causes this, and so I classify it as a WTF glitch. A minor glitch, but I thought I'd mention it. The emblems still have problems loading properly while trying to get a game in Warzone Firefight. Now, this is more of a bad game design decision than it is a glitch, but anytime you get EMP'd in a tank, the barrel will rotate back to its original spot, despite being EMP'd. In this clip, we see just how frustrating this can be. Minor glitch. If you try to assassinate an enemy when the round ends, even if the enemies despawn or die, the assassination animation will still go through. No, the glitch in this clip is not the poorly textured blood, but the fact that enemies continue to spawn during the intermission. Just let me get my weapons, you stupid grunts! Another clip that really highlights the unfair difficulty. In this instance, the intro is playing normally, but if you notice, as the screen fades to black, you see it light up again. This is because during the intro, before players are given control of their Spartans, the Prometheans have already spawned in. And by the time control is given to the player, and we are able to sprint to the location, they have already captured 25% of the armory, which actually makes this round an attack rather than a defense. Most of you are probably aware of the bizarre physics with the vehicles in Halo 5. In this instance, we see the moving Forerunner core is actually able to send my Warthog flying through the air. This could be really annoying for a player if they set up their turret behind the core, preparing to defend, only to get launched through the air and have their positioning all screwed up. A couple small glitches. In the beta, the scoreboard did not always display the proper order of numbers. Here, it shows 1, 3, 4, and then a second later, it shows 1, 2, 4. Kinda reminds me of Firth. Also, in the final round text in the bottom right, the L in final is actually capitalized. This is a typo present in the actual release of Warzone Firefight. Here we have a clip that once again showcases the absurdly unfair difficulty. In this case, we have a player who runs towards a Grunt Goblin. The player cannot actually see the boss, but when the Goblin fires its needle blast, the tracking is so strong, it follows him before he even peeks around the corner.
Prepare for GRUNTPOCALYPSE.
Well, this isn't a glitch, but I want to include this because I never want to hear Palmer say the word GRUNTPOCALYPSE again. As you can see in this clip, the Mythic Knight boss fires from a considerable range. What's odd is just how far the incineration cannon bullets will follow and home in on the player. Why do almost all the enemies in Warzone Firefight need homing weapons? Now this clip highlights the poor AI and unfair difficulty again. As most Halo players know, the Hunter's fuel rod gun is a projectile with no homing capabilities, but this is not the case in Halo 5. As you can clearly see, the fuel rod arcs downward and hits the player in his mongoose. But in the case of Halo 5, the Hunters have homing weapons, and unless you play with a shoot, hide Call of Duty type playstyle, chances are you will die to these enemies and their powerful homing capabilities. Keeping with the tradition of poorly programmed AI for the Hunters, the player notices the nav point is in an odd place and leaves his Wraith to investigate, only to find that the last boss is floating in midair and doesn't know what to do. Sometimes Warzone Firefight is brutally unfair, sometimes it is hilariously easy. As most of you have probably experienced, Warzone Firefight has a lot of problems related to the intro cinematics. In this case, a bizarre sound effect plays before the game has finished loading. In this case, the intro plays with no sound except Palmer's voice, which sets a very awkward and bizarre tone.
Welcome to Warzone, Spartan. You're the last boots on the ground. Fight through rounds of increasing difficulty.
These types of glitches can leave the player really confused as to whether or not their TV audio is screwed up, the game settings are screwed up, or if they're just not hearing things right. But in reality, the intro is just glitched. In this clip, we can see how there are 3 or 4 flash frames where 3 additional pelicans morph in. This probably happens because the programmers reused the same intro from the regular Warzone and had to move the 3 extra pelicans that spawn on the other side of the map to this side. But instead of cutting the cinematic short to prevent players from seeing these flash frames, they didn't bother to fix it. This is another WTF glitch where a Jackal is, simply put, invincible. He's able to shoot and move, just not able to die. Here's another example of invincible enemies. This soldier is being endlessly pelted with explosive bullets from the answer, but he doesn't feel the need to react or do anything. After a while, the player jumps up, the soldier disappears, reappears, and then teleports away. This is a recurring and common glitch that highlights the poor AI behavior of the knights, ridiculous jump height, and also goes to show how regular Warzone maps are not good for Warzone Firefight. Here is an example of the knight standing in a very peculiar spot. How did he get there? And why was he just standing there? Here is an example that shows the knight trying to jump through the hole on the side, but because his jump height is so ridiculous he can't make it, instead landing consistently on the little ledge. He then twitches wildly as he is in a very confusing, unfamiliar location. The funniest example of this glitch is this, where you can see 2 knights have fallen prey to this glitch. I find it odd that this was never patched or fixed, because if you pay attention, this will happen in nearly every single game of Warzone Firefight on Arc. Here we have another WTF glitch of an elite body being magnetized to a piece of a destroyed Banshee. You've probably seen this type of glitch before where an elite or a Spartan will die and parts of their body will just get magnetized or stuck into something. This clip shows just how distracting the glitches are in this game, as the player is more interested in this hilarious bug than he is interested in completing the final round of Warzone Firefight. This is an overlapping problem with all of the Mancannons in Halo 5, and I'm including it because the same principal problems apply to Warzone Firefight. Namely, you should never use a Mancannon if you're in a vehicle. It will get stuck, and you will lose it. This can often result in the death of yourself or your teammates, and you'll be forced to wait out the terribly inconvenient respawn time. Here is a clip that highlights the poor design of the Warzone Firefight maps and the bad hit registration of the Scorpion. In the beginning, I fired 2 shots at 2 different elites, killing them both, but causing no visual explosion. Now, the part of this glitch that showcases the bad map design is this. I'm in a tank and I'm trying to kill these bosses, but the maps are not designed with this type of combat in mind. It looks like I'm driving like an idiot, but I'm actually trying to turn this thing around to run away and escape, because if I try to charge towards them, I'll be as good as dead. I try my best to retreat and fire at them, but I can't escape from the wildly accurate Banshees and Wraiths. I fall into a crevice and die. In this scenario, a tank is horrible because I have so few options for maneuvering around the map. This is more likely a bad game design decision than it is a glitch. Between each intermission, there is no indication of what or where the next round will take place. And in huge Warzone maps, this can mean players will have to wait for the next objective to appear before they can make a decision on what Reqs to use or where to go. This is especially annoying for defense rounds, as enemies will spawn on or near the defending objective, almost immediately after the round starts. This is a common glitch seen in Warzone. Again, the same slow-mo needle thing happens in Warzone Firefight as well. Another example of this glitch, except this time it looks like a phantom turret shot is stuck in the wall. And once again, you can see how these glitches distract the player from actually playing the game. This is probably one of the most infuriating glitches I've seen.
Teammates eliminated Warden Eternal. Objective failed.
As you heard, Palmer proclaims victory, but because the timer and death of the boss were so close, the game doesn't know which one to go with and plays both audio clips of victory and failure. Here is another example of this glitch.
Teammates eliminated Warden Eternal. Objective failed.
Here we have another distracting glitch. For whatever reason, when the player spawns, there is a red glow. No idea what causes this. Unlike the can't redeem Reqs glitch, this one actually has Palmer saying Req Confirmed.
Req Confirmed.
As you can see, it says vehicle spawn, and we see the player decides to redeem a needle hog. But for whatever reason, he doesn't spawn with it. Also notice his respawn is delayed. The timer sits at 0 for 5 seconds. Here's another example where it clearly says vehicle spawn, but yet he does not spawn in a vehicle. I don't know if the game ate his Req or if it just wasn't registered. Either way, it's pretty game breaking and annoying and further proves how unreliable the Req system is. Here's an infuriating clip showing the massive respawn delay that can sometimes happen. In this instance, the timer sits at 0 for over 15 seconds. While this video does end before the player spawns, it is safe to say the timer sat at 0 for over 15 seconds. This clip shows an absurdly broken glitch on the respawn timer. This is in the Spanish version of the game, and you can see the player has to wait over 10 minutes to spawn. Halfway through, the timer loses 60 seconds for some reason. I'm not sure if he was able to spawn for the rest of the game, or if his team lost. This glitch may not be exclusive to Warzone Firefight, but it is interesting nonetheless. Here we see the player fires an ad victorium shot, but one of the rockets doesn't explode. Instead, it stays attached to the soldier that killed him. Had this glitch not happened, he might have made the fight a little bit easier for his allies. This is an infuriating, time-wasting glitch, where the last of the enemies are killed in a Protect the Core round. What happens afterwards is the game does not spawn more enemies to fight, nor does it register that we completed the mission. So we are forced to wait out the remaining 3.5 minutes, doing nothing. Multiply that by 8 players, and this glitch wasted a total of 28 minutes of playtime. This is a glitch where the screen fades to black very quickly, and removing the pistol from the display of the player. Interesting to note is the reload sound effects do not play, and after the player switches his weapon, the glitch disappears. Here is another example, happening at the same time as the last instance, during the first round on Darkstar. Here is yet again another example, happening in the same circumstances as before. As most of you have probably noticed in your time playing Halo 5, the biggest problem with Warzone is the god-awful spawning for enemies, vehicles, and players. In this example, we see how the Prometheans spawn underneath a Scorpion and send it soaring straight up into the air, effectively screwing up any positioning and strategy he might have had. Here's another example of the same thing, once again happening on the same map. How are players supposed to move towards the objective when enemies spawn underneath them and send them flying through the air? Combined with the horribly long respawn timer, this glitch is game-breaking. Here the player spawns in a crate and cannot escape, no matter how hard he tries. Once again, we see how these glitches affect the gameplay and detract from the experience, as the player will be forced to kill himself in order to respawn and hope the same thing doesn't happen again. Here's another example of terrible spawning. This time the player spawns right in the face of a knight with a scatter shot. Luckily, he is able to react quickly enough and escape. Slowing this clip down, we see that the time between the player spawning and him taking damage is 5 frames. Within 1/10 of a second of his spawn, he has already taken damage. Of course, spawning was a problem back in the beta as well. In this instance, I spawn over 274 meters away from the objective, and I'm forced to go on a tedious jog to join my teammates in combat. Thought the spawning would be fixed in the release of Warzone Firefight? Wrong! Because the players have absolutely zero control over where they spawn. It can often result in them spawning 400 meters away from the objective on the complete other side of the map. Taking into account the respawn time on the first round and the time it took me to drive to the objective, I spent 40 seconds getting where I needed to be. Simply allowing players to choose from the different spawn points in Warzone would fix this obnoxiously time-wasting glitch. Another example of this glitch happening in the final round, except this time the respawn timer is 30 seconds, and it takes me 30 seconds to get to the objective, effectively meaning I spent 1 minute of the 5-minute round getting to the objective. This is a similar glitch to the Phantom disappearing and reappearing glitch, although this one is much more obvious and poorly designed. Getting bored and wondering where all these grunts are coming from, I look up towards the sky and see the programmers have decided to spawn these grunts in a very obvious way. These are the types of things that players should not see, as it is immersion breaking and distracts the player. Quite possibly the most offensive evidence of terrible spawning in all of Halo 5 is this clip right here. No, I did not cut this footage. This is an actual spawn by a player in Warzone Firefight. Slowing it down, the time between his spawn and his death is 6 frames, or 1/10 of a second. If you are unlucky enough, you can die within 1/10 of a second of spawning. This is one of the most infuriating spawns I've ever seen in a video game, giving the player absolutely no time to react, to see, or even think before he is killed. Another example of the vehicle spawn glitch. Again, you can clearly see the player is meant to spawn in a vehicle, but simply doesn't. Thought you were safe from bad spawning in the armory or near a Req station? Think again! Here we see a player trying to redeem Reqs for the next round, only to have a swarm of Prometheans spawn in the armory and kill him quickly. Now, the problems with spawning are not exclusive to enemies, vehicles, and players, but also to air vehicles. In this instance, the player redeems a Wasp and is instantly targeted by the swarm of pinpoint-accurate Prometheans. Being totally confused and out of position, the player tries to escape, only to get killed from an absurd range. Another infuriating clip and evidence of bad vehicle spawning, and the absurd respawn timer. In this case, the player waits to spawn a vehicle in the already tough defend the core round, only to have the timer reset to 50 seconds. And this is only the 3rd round. How did this game mode get released in this state? I am truly shocked. We've all had that experience in Warzone when you spawn, instantly fall off a cliff, and die. Well, the same thing happens in Warzone Firefight. In this instance, I was able to react quickly enough to the terrible spawning and save my own life. So that about does it for the spawning glitches. Now let's move on to spectating. As we've seen earlier, enemies and parts of the map will phase in and out when looked at from a distance. This is a glitch inherent to the design of Halo 5, but it goes even further than that, because the programmers put the spectating cameras in places that makes this glitch even more obvious. Here is another example. Another thing to note is in Warzone Firefight, players cannot choose who or where they spectate from. This could have easily been fixed had the programmers given players the ability to spectate their allies, the bosses, or if they put the cameras in better locations. This is a bizarre glitch that once again breaks the tradition with the previous games. Not only are enemies holding turrets able to melee, but their melee attack is also an insta-kill. This was another thing I had to retrain my brain to accept in Halo 5. Alright, so... what the fuck? What is going on? Okay, so someone sent me this clip, so I have no context on what is going on. I have nothing else to say. Now, you're probably no doubt aware about the various bugs and glitches in relation to the vehicle physics of Halo 5. Needless to say, these problems are not excluded from Warzone Firefight, and when combined with the bad map design, poor spawning system, they can make for some pretty hilarious, yet annoying glitches. As I talked about earlier, Urban is not a well-designed map for Warzone Firefight or large vehicles. As you can see, the other tank is sitting in front of the vehicle spawn bay because he doesn't have many options to move around the map. This was his greatest mistake of the day. Here's another example on the same map. This time, a Warthog sends a shockwave so massive it launches the allied Scorpion through the air and sends debris flying across the map in a chaotic mess. This glitch makes it an absolute nightmare for players to coordinate and position themselves properly when trying to fight the bosses. If players could choose which vehicle bay they spawned in, this glitch would happen far less frequently. A third example of this same problem happening on the same map in the exact same spawn location. Surprisingly, the destruction in this clip is greater than the previous one, sending a Warthog, a Scorpion, and massive crates soaring through the air. Looking carefully, we can see that this team has a total of 4 Scorpions on the battlefield, again showing how poor the map design is and how it is not meant for so many vehicles in such a small area. But these vehicle hunches don't just happen because of spawning. They can also happen if you so much as touch another vehicle. In this hilarious clip, we see 3 players having a bit of fun, running into each other. But then one of the tanks touches just the right spot and sends both of them flying through the air. What's funny is the Scorpions that get launched are the Oni and Hannibal variants, 2 incredibly rare and powerful tanks. Unfortunately, the driver of the Hannibal gets killed because of this glitch. And because of the absurd respawn time and how quickly weapons and vehicles despawn from the map, as well as players' inability to choose their spawns, the player lost his very rare powerful tank due to an absurd vehicle physics glitch, as well as severely disadvantaged his team and himself from winning the round. This clip almost makes me think the programmers are watching this game and then they're just like, "Alright you two, break it up." Another example of the bizarre vehicle physics, this clip shows 2 players in big tanks. The Wraith driver, falling close behind the Scorpion, barely touches it and gets thrown backwards. I guess the lesson here is never touch 2 vehicles together in Halo 5. Alright, we're almost done with all the footage I have. These last few clips are minor bugs. In this one, we see that the name of this light rifle is titled Light Rifle, but after picking it up, you can clearly see that it is a more powerful variant. However, the game is mistaken and identifies this weapon incorrectly. This is a bizarre glitch of a player trying to find a hiding spot, only for the game to push him out twice. The second time he is hit and killed by an incredibly accurate shot from the AI Wraith. Finally, we have a weird glitch where I die from an apparent headshot. But we don't see what type of projectile it was that killed me, and the game identifies the killer as a phantom, a confusing, undeserved death. In conclusion, Warzone Firefight is the glitchiest, buggiest game mode I have ever played in a Halo game, which should be apparent from the absurd length and the amount of glitches present in this video. It goes beyond just having an unfair difficulty, and I cannot fathom how 343 managed to release something so utterly broken when they not only had a beta for testing, but had plenty of time to bug test this and make sure it worked properly. In addition, they had access to endless player feedback, and the only real thing they've done to balance this game mode is switch up the rounds. I think this video was necessary because we should all try to understand game design and how big of an astronomical failure Warzone Firefight is by game design standards, and by Halo standards. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I spent an insane amount of time downloading, categorizing, naming, typing up the script, and editing this video. So I really appreciate any and all support you can give me. And once again, I want to thank SPD Cadet and Yark47 for helping me type the timestamps up for this video. I want to thank everyone who sent me clips for this video. Thank you so much for making this video possible. Alright everybody, that's all I got for today. This is the Act Man signing out. Peace!